Welcome to the second episode of our heptalogy, Mystery of the Greats. This story is not about a palace, not about a title, and not about a crown. It's a story about a woman who carried light and paid for it with loneliness. The world saw a princess. She only wanted to be human. She knew how to love when it already hurt, and how to smile when her heart begged for silence. Close your eyes. Imagine not a princess, but a woman who believed in kindness and made it her crown. She entered history as if her destiny had been written in the stars long before her birth. Her life contained everything: the splendor of royal palaces, the love of millions, the adoration of crowds, and the loneliness that weighed on her heart more heavily than any crown. From the very beginning, her smile carried not only tenderness but also fragility, as though a shadow hid behind the radiance. People looked at her as if she were a fairy tale heroine, but Diana herself lived in a world where every movement was captured by dozens of cameras, and every mistake was dissected by millions of voices. Two worlds converged within her: the cold marble of royal walls and the living warmth of a human soul. And it was precisely this duality that made her a symbol, a woman who managed to be closer to the people than any royal figure before her. But every legend has a tragic note. The brighter her life burned, the shorter her path became. The night in the Paris tunnel marked the final point, but not the end of the story. It was then that the mythology of Princess Diana was born, the woman whose heart continues to beat in the memory of the entire world. Diana Spencer was born on July 1st, 1961, in Park House on the Sandringham estate, into a family with deep aristocratic roots. Her childhood might have seemed serene: spacious halls, green parks, and upbringing in the best traditions of the English gentry. Yet from the very start, life confronted her with trials. Her parents divorced when she was still a young girl. This fracture in the family became her first deep wound. Little Diana acutely felt loneliness and abandonment. And perhaps it was then that the compassion within her began to take shape, the very quality that later made her the people's princess. She did not grow up as a dazzling star, but rather as a quiet, modest child. At school, Diana was not outstanding in academics, yet she was known for her kindness and gentleness. Teachers recalled her sensitivity and her ability to care for others. She loved music and dance, and she dreamed of becoming a ballerina. But her tall height, over 178 centimeters, closed that path for her. Fate was preparing a different role. In her youth, she showed a remarkable trait for someone of noble birth. She could be one of the people. Diana worked as a kindergarten assistant, laughing and playing with the children as if she were part of their world. No one could have imagined then that this modest young woman would one day become the symbol of Britain. Her modesty, tenderness, and hidden strength, qualities shaped during childhood and adolescence, became the foundation of the woman whom the world would come to love. The story of Diana and Charles began in the late 1970s. At first, Charles courted her sister Sarah, but in 1980 he turned his attention to young Diana. Their meetings were rare, their conversations brief. She later admitted that before their engagement she had seen her future husband no more than a dozen times. Yet both the royal court and Charles himself considered her the right bride. There were several reasons. Diana came from the ancient aristocratic Spencer family, which emphasized her noble background. She was young, innocent, and had no past relationships that could spark scandal. In the eyes of the court, she was perfect for the role of the future king's wife and mother of heirs. Camilla, on the other hand, older with life experience and her own marriage behind her, was deemed unsuitable. For the monarchy, she was unacceptable, but for Charles, she remained the woman he trusted and never let go of. Diana suspected Camilla's influence, but believed that after the wedding, everything would change. Yet just days before the ceremony, she came across a bracelet among Charles's belongings engraved with the initials G and F, Gladys and Fred, his and Camilla's nicknames for one another. The bracelet was meant for Camilla. For Diana, it was a devastating sign that she was not entering a union of two, but a marriage where there would always be a third. On July 29th, 1981, the grand wedding took place at St. Paul's Cathedral. Around 750 million people around the world watched on television. Crowds lined the streets of London to greet the procession, and Diana's ivory gown with its record-breaking 25-foot train became a symbol of the occasion. To the world, she looked every inch the fairy tale princess. Yet later she admitted that even on that day, when the entire globe admired her, she felt alone. The honeymoon aboard the royal yacht, Britannia, quickly shattered her illusions. Charles brought along boxes of books and watercolor supplies, spending hours reading or painting. Diana, longing for warmth, conversation, and romance, felt neglected. She later recalled that she cried almost every day. The honeymoon aboard the royal yacht Britannia quickly shattered her illusions. Charles brought along boxes of books and watercolor supplies, spending hours reading or painting. Diana, longing for warmth, conversation, and romance, felt neglected. She later recalled that she cried almost every day. Camilla's presence continued to shadow their marriage. Charles spoke to her on the phone, sought her advice, and relied on her emotionally. For Diana, it was unbearable. She felt like an outsider beside her own husband. Years later, in her famous 1995 BBC interview, she would put it into words. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. Beyond her troubled marriage, Diana remained a young woman with her own passions. She loved to dance. In her youth, she had even dreamed of becoming a ballerina, and after the wedding continued to take lessons. She adored the music of Elton John and George Michael, enjoyed skiing, swimming, and horseback riding. At the same time, she cherished simple joys, playing with children, gardening, or watching television dramas. This blend of simplicity and glamour gave her a unique charm. From the very start, her life was divided into 2 worlds: the cold, formal marriage haunted by Camilla's shadow, and her personal world full of simple pleasures that gave her strength. After the wedding, Diana's life changed drastically and irreversibly. She found herself in a world where every movement was governed by strict protocol. For a young woman accustomed to freedom and simplicity, this was a profound shock. Inside the palace, unwritten laws reigned. Members of the royal family were forbidden to show emotion in public. Hugs or spontaneous gestures were out of the question. Every word and movement had to be approved by secretaries. Outfits were chosen by court dressers, and schedules were planned so tightly that there was almost no room left for personal life. Diana constantly broke these rules. She could suddenly stop during an official visit to hug a child, hold the hand of a sick person, or chat with a passerby. For the people, this was seen as warmth and humanity. For the court, it was scandalous. The Queen and her advisors repeatedly hinted that Diana was too accessible and too emotional. Even in the matter of raising children, she defied tradition. According to custom, princes were supposed to be raised by governesses and tutors, and mothers would see them mainly at ceremonial events. Diana insisted on doing things differently. She personally took William to school, played with her sons in the park, and brought them along on trips. For the first time in royal history, a child, young Prince William, accompanied his parents on an official overseas tour to Australia and New Zealand. Courtiers considered this unacceptable, but the public saw it as proof that Diana was a different kind of mother. Conflicts also arose in daily life. Diana disliked long formal banquets, preferring simple meals and informal settings. She could spend hours dancing or skiing, while the court demanded she maintain the image of a dignified royal figure. Even her love of fashion became a point of contention. Diana often chose bold, modern outfits that were deemed too bright and inappropriate for a princess. Her emotional nature also clashed with palace traditions. For centuries, the monarchy had lived by the principle, never explain, never complain. Royals were supposed to remain symbols, hiding all personal feelings. Diana, however, could not disguise her tears. Cameras captured her crying more than once at official events. For the palace, it was a breach of decorum. For the people, it made her even more beloved. Very quickly, it became clear. Diana did not fit into the rigid system. She was too alive for the cold rules of the palace. For the monarchy, this was a problem. For the people, it was proof that their princess was not just a symbol, but a human being. Behind the glitter of official ceremonies and the smiles for the cameras, there was another side to Diana's life. The youth and sincerity that the public adored so much often became a source of pain within the palace. Loneliness and the crushing weight of protocol turned her existence into a constant trial. The most difficult burden was her marriage to Prince Charles. His attachment to Camilla Parker Bowles was no secret, not to him, not to his circle, not even to many within aristocratic society. Courtiers knew of their long-standing relationship and tolerated it as something inevitable. For Charles, as heir to the throne, much was forgiven. He was expected to marry for duty, not for love. Diana, on the other hand, was expected to play the role of the perfect princess, no matter the cost. For her, this became a constant humiliation. She had hoped for love and support, but instead found herself in a marriage where her feelings carried no weight. Within the palace, her suffering was met with silence. Her emotionality and attempts to speak openly were seen as weakness, even as a threat to tradition. Married life soon turned into a cold coexistence. Charles spent his time traveling, playing polo, gardening, or with friends, and above all with Camilla. Diana was increasingly left alone. Their rare joint appearances in public were more obligation than genuine closeness. Behind the forced smiles they presented to the crowds, the tension was clear. The loneliness drove Diana into deep inner struggles. She suffered from depression and often felt like a prisoner in the vast halls of the palace. At times her despair pushed her to extremes. She admitted to self-harm, and once, while pregnant, she threw herself down a staircase in an attempt to make her pain visible. Instead of compassion, she was met with further silence, and detachment. Adding to the strain was the relentless press. Photographers followed her everywhere, turning her tears into headlines. Stripped of the right to vulnerability, she began secretly recording her thoughts on audio tapes, entrusting them to a close friend. These tapes, revealed years later, exposed the depth of her suffering in a marriage where love had been replaced by duty and formality. Thus, Diana's life became a constant battle, with the cold machinery of the palace, with the public eye, and with the shadows that consumed her marriage from within. If the palace felt cold and distant, Diana came alive in the presence of her children. The birth of William in 1982 and Harry in 1984 became her true salvation. In these two boys, she found the warmth and closeness that were missing from her marriage and from the rigid life of the court. Diana broke traditions even in motherhood. Typically, royal children were raised primarily by nannies, and mothers saw them mostly during formal occasions. Diana refused to follow this pattern. She personally took William to school, played with her sons in the park, and took them along on trips. For the royal family, this was unconventional. For the public, it was proof of her humanity. She wanted William and Harry to grow up as normal boys, to know life outside the palace walls, and to learn compassion. Diana often brought them to shelters, hospitals, and charity events where they saw poverty and suffering firsthand. She would say, "I want my boys to understand people's emotions, their insecurities, their distress, and their hopes and dreams." Even in small things, she challenged royal custom. For the first time in history, an heir to the throne, young William, accompanied his parents on an official overseas tour to Australia and New Zealand. Courtiers disapproved, but the public embraced it. Diana's insistence showed that for her, family mattered more than protocol. Her relationship with her sons became her greatest support. She might have been overshadowed in marriage, undermined by palace intrigue, and tormented by the press. But with William and Harry, her face lit up with genuine happiness. Those who knew her often said that she seemed most herself when she was with her children. Her maternal love became inseparable from her public image. People saw not just a royal figure, but a woman who fought to give her children love and warmth in a world where everything else felt cold. For millions of people, Diana became a symbol of kindness without boundaries. She did not confine herself to the ceremonial role of a royal representative. Instead, she went to places where members of the monarchy had rarely, if ever, been seen. Her work with the sick and the vulnerable was especially significant. She frequently visited hospices where she would spend time with the dying, speaking to them as if they were close friends. Witnesses recalled that she could sit by a patient's bedside for hours, simply holding their hand and listening. Within the royal household, such long and personal contact was frowned upon, but for those she touched, it meant everything. She supported organizations focused on the homeless, drug addicts, victims of violence, and the mentally ill. By the 1990s, Diana had become president of several major charities, yet what set her apart was her personal presence. For her, charity was not protocol, but a genuine calling. Her most visible work came through her campaign against landmines. In January 1997, she traveled to Angola, where thousands lived in daily danger from unexploded mines. Wearing protective gear, she walked through a cleared corridor of a minefield, an image that spread across the globe. Later that year, she visited Bosnia and met with survivors who had lost limbs and families to mines. These trips generated massive political momentum, helping pave the way for the 1997 Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel mines. What is less known is that Diana often visited hospitals and shelters without cameras or journalists. In London, stories spread that she would sometimes come to hospices late at night, quietly sitting with patients so they would not feel alone. After her death, many of the organizations she championed continued their work under her name. Among them was the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, which supported victims of war and landmines. Other charities she had worked with, including Centrepoint for homeless youth, Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children, the Leprosy Mission, and the National AIDS Trust, still honor her as a figure who changed their history. Diana's life had long ceased to belong solely to her. Every step, every word became the subject of discussion, while dozens of photographers waited outside her door and followed her cars day and night. Paparazzi turned her existence into an endless spectacle where private space simply did not exist. At times it seemed the world knew more about her than she could ever reveal herself. Rumors and speculation followed her constantly. Her marriage, her conflicts with Charles, her health, her alleged relationships after the separation. Everything was scrutinized. A simple gesture could spark headlines. If she appeared with a new companion, tabloids would proclaim a romance. When she grew close to the heart surgeon Hasnat Khan, she was described as deeply in love with a mysterious doctor. Later, her connection with Dodi Al-Fayed was portrayed as the beginning of a new destiny that could change her life. Her popularity grew to such heights that within the palace, she began to be seen as a threat. At times, Diana overshadowed not only Charles, but even the monarchy itself. Newspapers wrote more about her than about the Queen, and her face was recognized in the most remote corners of the world. This fueled the creation of myths. To some, she became a saintly figure, a modern Joan of Arc, a woman who dared to stand against a cold system. To others, she was tragic and doomed, as if her fate had been foretold. Even her early words that she would never be queen and might not live long became part of her legend. The rumors, speculation, and constant fascination only deepened after her death. Some whispered of conspiracies, others of cruel chance. One thing was certain: mystery always followed Diana, turning her life into legend and her death into an eternal enigma. By the mid-1990s, Diana and Charles's marriage had become a mere facade. Their joint public appearances looked strained, while behind the scenes there was only coldness and mistrust. In 1992, Prime Minister John Major officially announced in Parliament that the couple would live separately. It was a historic moment when, for the first time, the monarchy openly admitted to a rupture in the life of the heir to the throne. After that, each went their own way. Charles stopped hiding his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, and what had once been a discreet affair became increasingly open. For the palace, this was not unexpected, but for Diana, it remained a source of deep humiliation. She realized that Camilla was not simply a rival, but part of the very system that had never truly accepted her. The turning point came with Diana's 1995 BBC interview. There she spoke words that became famous. I wanted to be a queen of people's hearts, but I don't think I will ever be queen of this country. This was not only a confession of personal pain, but also a challenge to the monarchy itself. Her battle with Camilla was no longer just about Charles. It became symbolic of two different models of womanhood at the court. Camilla represented continuity and tradition, the discreet yet enduring companion. Diana embodied change, openness, humanity, and sincerity that the system could not tolerate. In 1996, the divorce was finalized. Diana retained the title Princess of Wales, but was stripped of the style Her Royal Highness. For her, this was a painful blow. She no longer belonged to the inner circle of the monarchy, while Camilla, despite public disapproval, steadily strengthened her place at Charles's side. After the divorce, the confrontation became more visible. The press and public constantly compared the two women. To the people, Diana remained a symbol of warmth and sacrifice, while Camilla was seen as the destroyer of a marriage. Their rivalry transcended the personal. It became part of the broader debate about the future of the monarchy, whether it should remain a cold institution of duty or embrace the humanity and compassion that Diana embodied. In 1997, Diana turned 36. After the divorce, she lived at Kensington Palace, devoted herself to charity work, and focused on her close bond with her sons. William was 15, Harry 12, and Diana spent as much time with them as she could. In January 1997, she traveled to Angola to support the campaign against anti-personnel landmines. The photographs of her visit spread worldwide and caused a strong political reaction. In August of that year, she visited Bosnia, meeting survivors of minefields. These trips became the pinnacle of her humanitarian activity. In June 1997, she announced she would step down from more than 100 charities, keeping only 6 that were most important to her. Centerpoint, support for homeless youth; English National Ballet; Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children; the Leprosy Mission, National AIDS Trust, and Royal Marsden Hospital. She explained this decision as a way to focus her energy on specific causes and reduce public obligations. That summer, Diana spent time with Dodi Al-Fayed, son of billionaire Mohammed Al-Fayed, owner of Harrods. They vacationed aboard his yacht in the Mediterranean, and their photographs filled the front pages of newspapers worldwide. Rumors and speculation immediately followed, including claims of a possible engagement. Meanwhile, Diana remained a figure of global importance. In July 1997, she visited Italy and Greece, meeting with charity leaders and dignitaries. She deliberately avoided many high society events, preferring humanitarian causes to courtly formality. The final months of her life were lived under constant pressure from paparazzi. Every outing, every private moment was photographed, chased, and turned into headlines. On August 31st, 1997, in Paris, that relentless attention ended in tragedy. On August 30th, 1997, Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed flew to Paris from Sardinia. They stayed at the Ritz Hotel, owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed. That evening, the couple dined at the hotel before deciding to go to a private apartment on Rue Arsène Housset. To avoid the press, they chose to leave through the back entrance. Their car, a Mercedes-Benz S280, was driven by Henri Paul, the hotel's deputy head of security. Also in the vehicle were Diana, Dodi, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones. At around 12:20 a.m. on August 31st, the car left the Ritz. Almost immediately, paparazzi on motorcycles began to pursue them. At 12:23 a.m., the Mercedes entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at high speed, estimated at over 100 kilometers per hour, about 65 miles per hour. The driver lost control and the car crashed into a concrete pillar. Henri Paul and Dodi Al-Fayed were killed instantly. Diana was still alive but gravely injured. Rhys Jones survived with severe injuries. At 12:33 a.m., Diana was pulled from the wreckage and transported to the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital. Doctors fought for her life for several hours. Despite surgery and resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead at 4 a.m. The cause: severe internal bleeding and a torn pulmonary vein. News of her death spread around the world within hours. Outside Kensington Palace in London, mourners gathered with flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Within days, the site became a sea of tributes. The announcement of Diana's death on August 31st, 1997, caused an unprecedented reaction. By morning, thousands of people began leaving flowers at the gates of Kensington Palace in London. Over the following week, the area transformed into a sea of millions of bouquets, candles, and handwritten messages. On September 6th, 1997, the funeral took place. The ceremony was held at Westminster Abbey. According to the BBC, it was watched by more than 2.5 billion people worldwide, one of the largest televised events in history. The coffin was draped with the royal standard. Behind it walked Princes William and Harry, Prince Charles, Prince Philip, and Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. The sight of the two young boys following their mother's coffin became one of the most tragic and unforgettable images of the late 20th century. Earl Spencer delivered a speech that openly condemned the press for hounding his sister and criticized the royal family for failing to protect her. His words struck a powerful chord with millions around the world. At the funeral, Elton John performed a reworked version of Candle in the Wind in Diana's memory. The single later became one of the best-selling songs of all time. After the service, Diana's coffin was taken to the Spencer family estate, Althorpe. She was buried on a small island in the middle of a lake, chosen to ensure peace and privacy in death, the privacy she was so often denied in life. Public mourning lasted for weeks. The royal family initially faced heavy criticism for their silence and for not lowering the flag at Buckingham Palace. Under immense public pressure, Queen Elizabeth II gave a live address on September 5th, acknowledging Diana's impact and expressing personal sorrow. Diana's death became a defining moment, both of grief shared by millions and of crisis for the monarchy itself, which had to reckon with the depth of her popularity and the public's demand for empathy. Diana's death did not mark the end of her story. On the contrary, after 1997, her image transformed into legend, one that continues to live on in the memory of millions. She changed the very idea of what a princess could be, not a distant, untouchable symbol of a dynasty, but a woman of flesh and blood, capable of compassion and empathy. Her greatest legacy was her sons. Princes William and Harry have repeatedly said that their mother shaped their worldview. From her, they inherited their concern for ordinary people, their passion for charity, and their determination to break down barriers between the crown and the public. Many of the initiatives they support today, from helping veterans to addressing mental health, are rooted in Diana's example. Her humanitarian work continues through charities and organizations she supported. The international campaign against landmines, which she brought global attention to, gained momentum after her death, leading to the 1999 Ottawa Treaty, banning anti-personnel mines. Institutions like Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children, Centrepoint, and others still honor her as the figure who changed their history. Her influence also touched the monarchy itself. After her death, the royal family faced an unprecedented crisis of trust. It became clear that without warmth and openness, the institution could lose its connection with the people. Gradually, the crown adapted. Royals began appearing more often among the public, and the Queen herself adjusted her approach. In many ways, these changes were a direct result of Diana's example. For millions across the globe, she remains the people's princess. Memorials dedicated to her stand in London, Paris, New York, and many other cities. Her story continues to inspire books, films, and documentaries decades later. Diana's legacy is not only the memory of a tragic fate, but also a reminder that even within the strictest of systems, one can remain human. She proved that sincerity and kindness can become a force strong enough to change history. And for that reason, her name will forever remain a symbol of light, breaking through the cold walls of royalty.